So welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to work on the Acura Legend. Unfortunately, this might be the last project of the year. The Legend is now in storage mode, as you can see here. We've got everything pushed up against the wall, so this is how I typically store my cars during the long winter months here in Vermont. Um, but we have at least one more project on the Legend, and that's been somewhat of a thorn in my side. One is because I'm the one who actually caused this problem, unfortunately. And the second being, I'm not the greatest at auto body work. I've tried it in the past a couple of times, and it just hasn't really gone the right way to my expectations. It has always fallen short of expectations whenever I've done that. So let's talk about what our project is. This right here. As you can see, this is the front grille, and it looks pretty good. It's got some rock chips on there, so that's always kind of bugged me a little bit, and no pun intended. There are some bugs on here as well. But this right here happened after the National Acura Legend meet, and it was a result of me using a pressure washer. Should have known better never to use a pressure washer on an old Honda, especially a car with old paint. So we're going to take this off. I've got new paint and supply, so I'm going to go through the process with you of prepping this piece and getting it ready for paint. Okay, the next step was to remove the windshield washer spares. You can see here that it's got like this brushed effect. That's because I used some touch-up paint right before NOM to get this looking good. Both of these had basically worn through their paint and it was showing black. So I wanted to get that touched up. To do that, you have to remove this really fragile piece, which is called the hood insulator, or maybe an engine warmer. It's kind of funny because I don't really understand the purpose of this other than, um, just for decorative and then keeping the engine warm. But so we had to pull that apart. Very delicate operation there. Then we're going to get these sanded up and we'll get these painted along with our grill that is in the process. So next step will be basically sanding this down and getting it ready for paint prep. The removal of the front grille on the Legend is somewhat of a delicate operation. You're dealing with multiple clips here, and they're plastic. Plus, the grille is held in with some retaining nuts, 10 millimeter, that are in 4 locations. Fairly easy to get those off, but these clips you have to be super gentle with and really just take your time. Once you get to the point where the grille is out, then you have to go through the process of removing the inner grill from sort of the surround here. And what we'll do is we'll just see if we can get this part out, push that aside, and then get this off to the side as well so that we have essentially two pieces here. That'll make working with this a little bit easier. Obviously, we're going to clean all this up while we're in here. We'll take a look at anything that needs to be restored. Seeing a little bit of surface rust right here. That's really not that bad. Um, it just looks like a bunch of dirt. So that's really good news. Is that this hood is in really good shape. Not worried about any rusting occurring. Over here, kind of the same story. Looks like everything's in fairly good shape. Maybe this right here we could do some work on just to get that lifted back up and in place. Looks pretty pliable. I'm not seeing a lot of deterioration, but we could clean that up as well. I want to get a nice kind of rubbery surface back here. It's not so, it almost feels like sandpaper in some areas, like we're embedded dirt. So we'll clean that up too, kind of recondition this rubber so it's actually serving its purpose. Probably clean up with just a small manual wire brush to get some of that rust off and make sure that these are going to go back on pretty smoothly. The screws will be an interesting story here. Hopefully we don't break anything off while doing that. Doubt that this has ever been taken apart. Also a great time for us to clean this up on the back side. So kind of doing some multi-purpose work while we're in here with cleaning. Luckily I did not snap any of these. This is what I was talking about. You have to pinch these and kind of slowly work your way across, or I suppose you could work from one side and another side to the middle, but I found it a little bit easier to just do one and then another until it was fully off. And then you're just gently kind of rocking this until it breaks that rubber seal, and then everything is out. It was fairly easy to actually remove these elements from each other. So the gasket comes separately, definitely needs some reconditioning, so we'll certainly work on that. It looks like there was a little bit of adhesive used as well, so we'll have to think about how we want that to go back together when time comes. But the screws thankfully came out fairly easy, and then you can see the back side of it. So the next steps will be to clean and prep this and start thinking about how we want to lay down the paint here. So the paint that I'm using, for those interested, is the Deltron DBC #1. This is a base coat. It's, I guess, a subsidiary or some nature tied to PPG. So we've got our Seattle Silver Metallic paint right here. I went with this, which was a little bit pricey because I was told that it's going to be the closest OEM match that I can get. You can go cheaper, but just for instance, I think this cost me about $89 just for this small amount here. You have to use a reducer, and you also have to prep it, obviously. Got a spray gun here. This is the Harbor Freight one with and water filtration. We're going to filter it using some paint strainers going in, but from what I've heard, this should lay down a lot better than a spray can, but we will use a 2K clear from a spray can just so that I don't have to worry about spraying clear out of this gun, because I've heard numerous times that this gun does not work well with clear coat. So there's no point of even trying. I already struggle with painting as it is, like I've mentioned, so I'll keep it the 2K. Heard great reviews from that anyways. I've used it in the past one other time, worked well for the purpose I had, so I feel like it'll work again for this purpose. So we'll get it all cleaned up, we'll get it sanded, and then we'll start prepping for paint. Okay, so here's the setup that I'm gonna go with. I hope it works out. It's a little hard to get these little windshield washer nozzles in a good position, but what I found is that if I use this random wire that I have laying around that's more geared towards electrical, I can fit these little guys on top of the end of it while I'm holding the frame here. And my hope is that we can spray this all in one kind of swoop as we go across. So that's my setup. It's a little ghetto, but you know, just as everything you do at home, it's definitely not the way the professionals would do it, but it's good enough, or so I hope. And here we have the finished product. So after hours of prepping, so this literally took 2 days worth of time, and we still have more time that we have to go before we can do reassembly. So I did the sanding over one day. I did the primer and the adhesion promoter one day, let that cure overnight, and then did the color and clear today. So if you're looking to do this yourself, it's relatively easy to do to get a good finish just like this. So you can see the finish on that. Now there's going to be orange peel on here. That's to be expected. You're going to have that even if it was done professionally. Um, so we'll go ahead and wet sand this at a future point before we do reassembly. But I want to go over just a minute what it took to do this. So disassembly of the front grille and the windshield washer sprayers, that was probably a couple hours. Relatively easy to do. What I want to emphasize though is the painting process. I have never had good quality results when painting at home. I've always had mediocre, so this is the best result I've ever had. I would be proud to put this on the car and display the car with this type of results. So let me go over what I did. As you know, we started with the frame and it had that black spot right there. That was a result of me using a pressure washer on the car, and it basically just flaked off that paint. Well, I was a little hesitant, but I figured this was a small enough project that I could probably do it on my own. Speaking to my paint supplier, I learned that rattle cane paint jobs are probably the most problematic and give you the worst results. So, in a conversation with him, he suggested that I try spraying it using a typical process where you have basically an adhesion promoter, you have an epoxy base coat, clear coat, just like they do with the professionals. And he swore that I would have an easier time and I would like the results better. And he wasn't wrong. So let's go ahead and recap what the process was. I sanded everything down, took all the paint off. I wanted to go back to the original plastic. Some people would say that's a bit risky because you can use the paint or the base coat layer as an adhesion layer for your future color coat. The problem was is that we had that black spot where it was all the way down the plastic. So with that in mind, we took everything off. I used a 180 grit sandpaper to really dig down deep and get the paint off. Then I switched to a 600 grit and then finally a 1000 grit. That was basically to smooth out all the scratches from the 180. Then what I did was I did 2 coats of adhesion promoter on all surfaces, made sure I had a nice even layer. Then I let that dry for about 60 minutes, or you could just follow the instructions on the can. And then I did a 2K epoxy primer, and that was really because I wanted some durability. You don't have to go that route, but if you're gonna put it on the front of the car, it's gonna get abused, right? It's gonna hit everything, rocks, sand, who knows. So I wanted something that was a little bit more durable than just base primer. And I'm glad I did because that epoxy primer really seems like it had a nice adhesion quality and it kind of locked in that plastic, which is very hard to adhere to, which is why you use an adhesion promoter. Epoxy primer also gives you a more durable paint surface to lay your base coat down. So using that, I could then come back behind after about 12 to 16 hours of dry time with that epoxy and then shoot my base coat, which is the color that you see. When I did that, I was thinking about the guns that I wanted to use. Well, I already had a Harbor Freight paint gun from another project, not related to automobiles, and I said to myself, why not see if that would work? I read and researched on how to configure that gun so it would paint automobile paint and lay down a nice even layer. So if you're going to do that, you can get these guns for about 20 bucks from Harbor Freight, and if you do some homework, you can learn how to set them up appropriately. After setting it up appropriately, I made sure that my air compressor could handle this basic job. I didn't want to use my big air compressor because I wanted to shoot indoors. And that's the other thing I want to emphasize. Make sure that you have basically a nice area to paint. It doesn't look nice, but it's sealed off, concealed. Not a lot of debris is going to end up flying into your paint. You want to make sure that you take that extra step to make sure that you're not going to get debris in. Now, I ordered tack cloths, but they didn't arrive in time for this project, and I wanted to get this done. So, those you could use or you don't have to use. Either way, you probably should use them, but I didn't. And the results came out pretty good, I would say, without them. So, keep that in mind. Then, after that 12 to 16 hours of dry time in that Harbor Freight gun, I came by and did a base coat layer. And I tested my spray pattern intensely before attempting to do this to make sure that I had the right atomization of the base coat before attempting to paint my piece. Next, after I did, let's see, I did 4 coats of base. So the couple of first coats were just basically dusting coats, and then I came back and made sure I had full coverage on most of the areas. I missed a couple areas on the windshield washer nozzles, so I had to go back and make sure I hit those. And I just kind of did a nice even flow, make sure I had full coverage. And then they always say one more base coat layer after you have full coverage. That will let everything sit nice and flat like you want it to. So then I let that dry for about 30-40 minutes and then came back with a 2K Glamour Gloss clear coat that gave me this result. And this has 4 coats on it. And the reason why I wanted 4 coats is because I wasn't getting the results that I wanted with 3. They say typically 2 to 3, which should do it. But the 4 gives me that extra layer. And now I'm going to come back behind it after it's fully cured and do some wet sanding. So I'll probably end up with about like 3.5, maybe 3 in the end. And I think that'll give it this nice finished product. There's a little bit of orange peel on there, but I think my bigger problem will be how closely does it match to the original OEM paint. I have a feeling that there's much more metallic in this paint than there is on the actual car, so I'm curious. The color might be right, but the metallic flake will make it a huge difference in how it looks. Either way, this is a far cry better than that huge black spot, and all of these um, nozzles will look a lot better than what they did before. So, with that being said, would I try this again? I think I would try this again. But the problem is the amount of patience that you have to have when you're going into a project like this. I think part of the problem that when I've tried to paint before is I use lower end products. I went high end this time to make sure it worked well. But then additionally, I was impatient. So I would always come back and be like, "Oh, is it good enough? Does it look right?" And then I would spray a little bit more and then I would get a run or I'd have something that didn't quite adhere right. Always problems in there and I would be super frustrated with it. So my word of advice is do your research, make sure that you know exactly how you're going to go and attack this. I spent more time setting everything up here than actually probably doing the painting. And that's important. All the prep work, if you do the prep work right and it looks good on the front end, it will look good when you're done in the end. So spend extra time making sure that you've done a quality prep job and then mix the color and the clear coat, which is what you really want to look great in the end. Okay, we've got the Acura Legend all buttoned back up after our little restoration project to repaint our front grille and address the windshield washer sprayers. So as you know, this car saw a little bit of a cosmetic blemish coming back from NOM where we had some of the paint flaking off right about here. This was really an eyesore. I tried to touch it up, which made it worse using touch-up paint. So it really needed to be redone, and boy, did it come out fairly good. I have to say, this is the first time that I've actually painted something on my own um, and actually had a good result. Now, it's not perfect. There's like a little bit of a blemish right here. This was from the epoxy primer underneath it. So, I mean, for doing this in the basement with non-professional tools and techniques. I think it came out really well. I'm really proud of what happened here. And I think it's very presentable, much more so than what it did before. And I think this is going to be really durable considering the products that we used. And I feel like the OEM application of the paint really did not have a good adhesion to the plastic sublayer underneath all the paint, which was evident when we went to sand it and it came off in basically a strip. Paint should never come off in strips like that. It should basically have full adhesion. So let's go. All in all, is it perfect? No. Would somebody say, yeah, I can tell it's been repainted? But that wasn't really the goal. The goal was to fix the blemish and make sure that this car is restored cosmetically, which is really our goal here. So now that we've got this taken care of and it's looking really nice and those windshield washer sprayers are matched again and not looking like they were brush painted, the next step, like I said, is to get this plumbed up so that the windshield washer sprayers work again, and then reinstall the insulator, and that will do it for this video. So if you have any questions about the process here, or you're curious about any of the products that I use, I'll link those down in the description below. Feel free to ask questions in the comment section, and for now, that'll be it. So we'll see you on the next one.